All right, we will have to end our urgent question here. Next, question number 1, Mr. Chan Kam-lam. Mr. President, it has been reported that during the period between May last year and February this year, an initiator of the Occupy Central movement, who is an associate professor at the Faculty of Law of the University of Hong Kong, passed on 4 donations totaling $1.45 million, respectively to the Faculty of Humanities, the Faculty of Law, and the Public Opinion Program of Hong Kong U for funding OC-related activities, such as paying the remunerations of a research assistant who works for OC and sponsoring the Project Civil Referendum conducted by the Public Opinion Program. He also admitted that the donations were made in the name of another OC initiator, but did not account for the true sources of the funds.
Some members of the public worry that certain people are conducting political activities under the guise of funding academic researchers, thereby gravely damaging the political neutrality as well as academic freedom of tertiary institutions. Regarding the financial matters of various tertiary institutions funded by the University Grants Committee, UGC, will the government inform this council, 1, whether it knows if UGC has issued to institutions under its auspices guidelines on whether they may accept donations designated for funding political activities or remunerating the relevant staff, and if UGC has requested the institutions to require their academic units accepting donations, in particular those donations used for designated projects, activities, or staff remunerations, to submit reports setting out detailed accounts of the uses of the donations and the relevant research data and academic achievements, so as to ensure that the donations are used for academic researches instead of political activities. If there are such guidelines and requirements, whether UGC has requested Hong Kong U to assess if the handling of the aforesaid donations has breached such guidelines and requirements. 2, whether it knows if UGC has currently requested the institutions to verify the true sources of donations so as to prevent anyone from conducting political activities in the name of the institutions. Whether UGC has monitored these institutions in this regard. And 3, as quite a number of members of the public have lodged complaints with Hong Kong U against the aforesaid teaching staff member about his organizing and participation in illegal road occupation and assemblies, and about his acting as a middleman to make donations of funds with unidentified true sources to the institution for conducting such activities. Whether the government knows if UGC has looked into how the institution has followed up on such complaints, and whether various institutions have put in place mechanisms for handling complaints lodged against the teaching staff in this regard, if they have, of the details. Secretary for Education. President. All institutions funded by the UGC are autonomous with their own ordinances and governing councils. The UGC notes on procedures state that institutions enjoy autonomy in the development of curricula and academic standards, selection of staff and students, initiation and conduct of researches, internal allocation of resources, etc. However, in view of the significant funding the institutions receive in the form of government subvention and private contributions, as well as the importance of higher education to the development of society, it is incumbent upon the government and the community at large to have a legitimate interest in the operation of the institutions. Therefore, while the government and the UGC attach great importance to safeguarding academic freedom and institutional autonomy, institutions are expected to remain committed to transparency and accountability in their operation to ensure that the funding is put to the appropriate use that serves the best interests of the community and students. On the 3 questions raised, I'm going to reply on the first and 2. First, UGC-funded institutions are autonomous in the management of their finance, including the acceptance and use of donations in general. Neither the government nor the UGC has stipulated specific rules on the handling of donations. However, as a good management practice and to protect their reputation and academic freedom, 11 higher education institutions, including the UGC-funded institutions, set up a working group with the Independent Commission Against Corruption, ICAC, in 2011, which studied various areas, including the administration of donations in depth, and compiled a guide on relevant best practices. So this is the copy of the guidelines. All institutions have confirmed that their internal guidelines and procedures for handling donations are in line with this guide. Salient points are summarized below. First, principles for handling donations. According to the information provided by the institutions, the major principles are as follows. Donations should contribute to the enhancement of teaching, research, and overall development of the institutions, and not for personal benefits of individuals. Second, no donation should be attached with conditions that would adversely affect an institution's ability to carry out its functions fairly and impartially. And 3, donations from sources known to an institution as illegal or unethical should not be accepted. Acceptance of donations. The council of each institution is the highest authority in deciding the acceptance of donations. Some councils have set up committees, which include independent members, for the purpose of vetting, monitoring, or guiding matters relating to donations. In general, the councils can delegate the approving authority of accepting donations to different levels of executives according to the size of a donation. But a donation involving a huge amount of money or a significant policy decision would require approval of the councils and/or their relevant committees. In deciding whether to accept a donation, the institutions follow the above-mentioned principles and their internal guidelines. As a general rule, institutions do not accept donations from unknown sources or unidentified donors, and will collect relevant information about the background of the donors as far as practicable. That said, once the identity of the donors is ascertained, institutions will respect their privacy and wishes. Management and use of donations. Each institution has a dedicated department for central coordination and administration of various donation-related matters, while individual staff, departments or faculties may also solicit and accept donations within their respective ambit of delegated authority. The dedicated department must be kept informed. All donations are properly documented, and the overall situation of donating is reported regularly to the respective councils. The donations are used in accordance with the relevant legislation, internal guidelines, and the donors' wishes. Like other revenue and expenditure items, the use and record of the donations are subject to audit by independent auditors, and the total amount of donations received and expended is published in the institution's annual financial report, which is released for public scrutiny. On the understanding that the guide on the relevant best practices compiled by institutions and ICAC is complied with, institutions handle and examine each donation case by themselves according to their internal guidelines and are accountable for their decisions. 3. According to the information provided by funded institutions, they have mechanisms and procedures for handling external complaints against their staff. In general, after receiving a complaint, the unit concerned will look into the complaint to see if it has primary justifications. Depending on the nature of the complaint and its seriousness, the case will be, if necessary, handled by an officer of the appropriate rank or an investigation team committee. An investigation and hearing, etc. will be conducted. The institution will take appropriate action or disciplinary measure based on the result of the investigation. Prior to investigation, the institution will notify the staff being complained against of the case and allow the subject an opportunity to clarify and respond. Also, each institution has an appeal mechanism in place to ensure that complaints are handled fairly and impartially. All officers should observe the principle of confidentiality, and actions pertaining to complaint handling will be properly recorded and filed. To reiterate, institutions enjoy autonomy in the handling of their internal affairs, including the handling of external complaints against their staff. However, the UGC notes on procedures also state that institutional autonomy does not exempt institutions from public interest and criticism. In this regard, both the UGC and I believe that the institutions will take each and every complaint case against their staff seriously and handle in a fair and just manner in accordance with the established procedure and mechanism. As for the administration and the UGC, they are not in a position to comment on any individual case handled by the institutions. The relevant institution must give a clear account of the facts. Mr. Chan Kam-lam, President, the Secretary said that there is this UGC notes on procedures, and he also says that institutional autonomy doesn't mean that they can disregard public interest. But then you seemed to be saying that the government cannot interfere or deal with any complaints under or against the staff of the institutions. I think we are talking about money politics here, and the normal teaching and academic freedom have been undermined. And some people are using their capacity as a teaching faculty to incite and organize students to occupy the roles, break the law, and create huge impact or detriment to public interest. We can't treat these as something of a routine complaints, and if you do that, that will be going against the expectations of the public. So my question is, will the government and the UGC on this issue make special requests for the institution to enhance their transparency in dealing with the matter? Secretary, thank you. In my main reply, I've emphasized one thing, and that is the government, or rather a lot of resources have been committed to the various institutions, and they do have a significant role to play in the development of society. And it is the community have a legitimate interest in the operation of the institutions. And in my last paragraph, I also said that we will be particularly concerned about this case, and we will make in-depth study of the case. That's what I said. We appreciate the concern, so that's why we must do it speedily. And I also want to emphasize that the institution concerned must collect the facts and then try to come clean and give a transparent a clear report in a transparent way. On the 12th of November, we've received 30 complaints, and we've immediately forwarded them to the institution concerned. And we've asked them to expeditiously collect the facts and then give a report. This is what is going on now. Thank you. Mr. Gary Chan. Thank you, President. I note that in the main reply, the Secretary said that the institutions normally don't receive donations from sources unknown, and they will try to gather information at the background of the donation source. And there have been suggestions in the community, and also that's admitted by Benny Tai, that the four batches of donations come from Reverend Chu Yu-ming, and they were actually donated by some people who were very concerned about the occupation movement. And then Hong Kong also issued a statement saying that they have complied with the relevant guidelines. Do you know that Hong Kong U has actually identified who these very these donors are? Are you satisfied with the Hong Kong U's report that they have already actually vetted and the donation amount? Yes, thank you. In my main reply, I emphasized that that UGC has this practice notes on procedures, and the different institutions have their own internal guidelines, that they have established procedures to vet the donations, and they should try to gather as much information as possible, and they should also be respecting the wishes of the donors as well. We recently noticed that there has been widespread concern on the donation issues, and as I said in my last paragraph, we would look at the details of the matter, and the Hong Kong U in its response made on the 13th of November said that it has acted in accordance with the established procedures. So they have to comply with their own internal guidelines, the UGC's guidelines, and also ICAC's guideline. The Secretary hasn't responded to my question. My question is simple. Do you believe that in the HKU's report that it has duly vetted the donations? If you don't believe in them, would you be asking HKU to furnish further information? Thank you, Mr. Chen, for your question. I must reiterate that, again, that under the best practice guidelines, donations are not there to serve personal interests. So we are starting the sort of understanding of the matter, and I would respond further when we have the details. Mr. Ip Kin-yuen, there are some reports saying that the public opinion program of HKU has received $800,000 from Benny Tai to sort of carry out the civil referendum. But then the records, the number of people voted as quoted by the telecom operators falls far below of what is claimed by POP. Now, Hong Kong U is an academic institution, so can the government tell us now if there are academic researchers which have received donations, and then there are abnormalities identified, will the government proactively investigate it? If there is no investigation, does it mean that, is it the case that the tertiary institutions are allowing people to use money to influence academic researchers? How can you uphold the reputations or credibility of academic researchers in institutions? Thank you, Chair, the member, for your question. We see clearly that there is widespread concern on the matter. As I said, the institution is obliged to come clean on the matter and to be accountable to the public. We've seen many reports, and we are receiving complaints, giving us new information day after day. So as I said, we would conduct in-depth study into the matter, and we hope that the university and the UGC, upon receiving further information, can give us information, and we can duly follow up. Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. Thank you, President. There are reports saying that for the donations from Benny Tai, at least one of donation is used as remuneration for a research assistant. And this research assistant has been transferred from one department to the POP to carry out the task of organizing the civil referendum. Does the government know whether the Hong Kong U, in vetting such donation, fully understands the use of such donation? And whether there is anyone who is trying to cover up the truth and then utilizing this amount to employ this research assistant? Is there any transfer of benefits, and does it go against the donation guidelines? Thank you, President, and member. The institution has to comply with its own internal guidelines, UGC's guidelines, and also the ICAC's best practice guidelines. All these guidelines provide clear information on how to deal with donations. And what is more important is there is an external vetting mechanism which is impartial and fair and just. And all these are there to make sure that things are done properly. To my understanding, the university is now conducting an analysis and they are still gathering information. So we would be keeping a close eye on all these and we'll try to understand as much as we can and follow up duly. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, President. In the government's main reply, there are three principles are cited for handling donations. Donations should contribute to the enhancement of teaching, research, and overall development and not for personal benefits of individuals, and no donation should be attached with conditions that will vastly affect an institution's ability to carry out its functions fairly and impartially. As what Mr. Wong Ting-kwong asked, well, at least one donation amount is designated for a research assistant, which has been transferred from one academic department to the POP. And Professor Benny Tai and also Reverend Ju said that these are the Occupation Central movement is an illegal activity. So based on that, we can safely say that the donation goes against these donation principles. The government may be saying that you have all the guidelines, but that's not the impression of the public. So how is the government going to follow up and make amends? As I said in the last paragraph of my main reply, and that is important, the government will further study the issue, and we stress that the university should give a clear report on the sources and the facts of the donations. Well, we've spent over 22 minutes on this question.
Second question, Mr. Ip Kin-yuen. Mr. President, recently there have been public comments that the encouragement of students to discuss Hong Kong people's participation in socio-political affairs by the teaching and learning activities under the theme of rule of law and socio-political participation in the liberal studies LS subject of the new senior secondary academic structure is one of the causes for the massive turnouts of secondary students in the occupation movements. There have also been press reports that the government intends to amend the LS curriculum to delete topics relating to the politics of Hong Kong and beef up the contents in areas such as the basic law. Some education bodies consider that such a move is tantamount to political intervention in educational affairs. Regarding the curricula of senior secondary subjects, will the government inform the Council, 1, of the details of the authorities' plan to amend the LS curriculum and justifications for that, the authorities' considerations in and their procedure for setting senior secondary subjects as core or elective ones, or changing the subjects as such, 2, of the criteria and procedure for amending the curricula and assessment guides for various subjects, the time generally required for the amendment process, and whether the subject teachers concerned will be consulted before amendments are made. If so, of the details and scale of the consultation, whether it will undertake that it will not, under any circumstances, amend the curricula of various subjects based on non-professional considerations. And 3, as it has been reported that an incumbent EXCO member who was formerly an official of the Education Bureau once promoting the LS subject claimed that the subject had become morbid, whether the authorities have assessed if the subject has deviated from the subjective, if the assessment outcome is in the affirmative of the details, if the assessment outcome is in the negative, the justifications for that. Secretary for Education. Mr. President, our reply to Mr. Ip's question is as follows. 1 and 2. The curriculum review of the liberal studies is part of the new academic structure NAS review. Since August 2012, the Education Bureau, EDB, the Curriculum Development Council, CDC, and the Hong Kong Examinations and Assessments Authority, Hong Kong EAA, have jointly launched the review of the new senior secondary NSS curriculum and assessment, including liberal studies. Short-term recommendations were announced in April 2013, and the first batch of medium-term recommendations, as well as the fine-tuning measures on the implementation of curriculum and assessment, were announced in April 2014. For details, you may read them on the designated webpage. It's 334.edb, so on and so forth. The second stage of the NAS medium-term review is now in progress, including students' learning experiences in the whole school curriculum, the impact of the NAS on students' further studies, the implementation of curriculum and assessment at the school level, including school-based arrangements, and the implementation of curriculum and assessment of individual subjects, including liberal studies. The proposed recommendations will be made according to student-centered and professional principles, including considering the achievement of curriculum aims, teachers' workload, balanced breadth and depth of the overall curriculum contents, students' knowledge foundation in the junior secondary level, catering for learner diversity in curriculum and assessment, alignment between public assessment and curriculum, and backwash effects, etc. We will further consult different stakeholders, such as teachers, principals, tertiary institutions, employers, and students through multiple channels, such as questionnaire surveys, focus group meetings, and forums in end November. The procedure and time generally required for revising the curriculum and assessment guides for various subjects would depend on subject nature and needs. When making important revisions, teachers and other stakeholders will be consulted, together with the existing committee mechanism and professionalism taking major role for discussing and implementing relevant revisions. Liberal studies is interdisciplinary by nature and is indispensable to the curriculum as a core subject. On one hand, it allows students to study an extensive curriculum appropriate for Hong Kong through 6 modules and covers personal development, society and culture, including local, national and global aspects, science and technology. On the other hand, it enables students to develop on the knowledge of foundation from the basic education and utilize their interdisciplinary knowledge with an issue inquiry approach so as to broaden their horizons, to construct more knowledge, to think critically and rationally, and to develop multiple perspectives. It also helps students develop positive values and attitudes so that they can better prepare themselves for the responsibilities and multiple roles in society and their future life. Liberal studies is complementary to the other core subjects, elective subjects, and other learning experiences, providing senior secondary students with diversified learning experiences suitable for their own interests and abilities. Deliberation on whether to set an NSS subject as a core subject or an elective subject should be evidence-based. We should consider whether the change can achieve the same education aims, maintain international standards and recognition, and articulation to study and career pathways, as the implementation and effectiveness of the NSS curriculum and assessment have yet to reach a state of stability. We need more time to collect data and conduct studies for fine-tuning and updating. Part 3 of the question. We respect the opinions expressed by different sectors of the community on educational issues. As I've pointed out in the reply above, the NAS medium-term review is still ongoing. We will adhere to the student-centered professional principles, propose recommendations, and consult schools, teachers, and professional organizations of the relevant subjects, as well as other stakeholders. The EDB will carefully collect and listen to views from all sides in order to make a review more comprehensive. The medium-term recommendations and the long-term development direction of liberal studies will be announced by July 2015. Meanwhile, the efforts made by the education profession on liberal studies deserve our recognition. According to the progress report on the new academic structure review released in 2013, most teachers and students agreed that the curriculum aims and learning outcomes of liberal studies had been achieved. Most teachers also agreed that the independent inquiry study was able to nurture students' problem-solving and independent thinking ability and had a positive impact on building up students' confidence in learning. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Ip Kin-yuen. Mr. President, I'd like the Secretary to state very briefly and directly to the core of my question, that is whether the administration is minded to change the status of the LS subject as a core subject, and whether there is any plan to delete topics relating to the politics of Hong Kong. Just yes or no, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, the Honourable Member. About this, about the reports of a speculative nature, it's difficult for me to respond here because we have not discussed the issues raised by the Honourable Member just now. Mr. President, my question was very direct. It's not a speculative question. It's just a yes or no question. Just briefly, directly answer whether there is such a plan or not. Secretary, is there a plan or not? First of all, we did not discuss whether it should be a core subject or an elective subject. As for whether some elements should be deleted, I cannot answer that because we just commenced the second stage review. Dr. Helena Wong. Mr. President, in the Secretary's reply just now, he emphasized that the review of the liberal studies is part of the NAS review. And in the Secretary's reply, he also said that the whole review would follow the student-centered approach and professional principles, and it would be evidence-based. These are the three important guiding principles, and I am very happy to hear the Secretary's reply. On the other hand, I also understand Mr. Yip's purpose of asking this question. Indeed, there is a concern because a member of the Executive Council and some electoral members coming from the pro-establishment camp giving remarks that the liberal study subject should be changed. It should be changed into an elective subject, and the topic relating to the politics of Hong Kong should be reduced. Well, please ask your question, Dr. Wong. I don't know what the intention of these members are, but will the administration do a good gatekeeping role to fend off the pressure exerted by these electoral members and the EXCO member so as to uphold the three guiding principles mentioned just now? Secretary, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, member, for your question. In part 3 of my reply, I state very clearly that we respect the views expressed by different sectors of the community on educational issues. We make this point very clear, but we will adhere to the student-centered professional principles and will also consult major stakeholders before proposing recommendations. These are the principles that we adhere to now, and that it should be student-centered professional principles. So can you make it more clearly that you're going to adhere to the 3 major principles and that you will not give up these 3 principles simply because of remarks made by the ex-members and electoral members? Well, Dr. Wong, I think Secretary has already answered your question. Dr. Kwok Kaki, Mr. President, by July 2015, before the outcome of the review is announced, there are already voices from the pro-establishment camp asking for the LS subject to be scrapped. And in fact, the national education issue already caused wide repercussions and negative sentiment among parents. So, Secretary, do you have any political mission to gradually change the liberal studies subject into the unpopular national education subject so that it will become a tool, a political tool? Secretary, thank you, member, for the question. I reiterate that the whole process will adhere to student-centered professional principles, bearing in mind the education principles. Now, from the start of the educational reform up to 2006, we have gone through consultation in depth and in rolling out the new academic structure. We have to continue to fine-tune the structure and collect views on that. Therefore, starting from 2012, we have started the medium-term and the long-term review. And the whole process, throughout the process, the professionals from tertiary institutions, teachers, and other professionals have given us a lot of valuable opinions, and we respect all the views expressed. My question was very clear just now. I asked about this the relationship with the national education subject. Secretary, please answer directly whether or not you're going to change the liberal studies subject into a national education subject so that it can revive. Secretary, in August 2012, the curriculum or the outline for the national education subject was shelved, and we made it clear that national and civic education is an important area of education, and school teachers and principals should, based on the curriculum and the needs of students, continue with the task of educating students in this in this aspect. And this is very clear. We saw that in the past few years it has developed in a very healthy manner. And liberal studies and national education are 2 different matters. I don't see any link between these 2. Mr. Leung Yong-chung. Thank you, Mr. President. Recently, there are views expressed linking liberal studies subject with the civic movement, and we're at the point when there is a review going on, and there is also consultation concerning the long-term goal of this subject. So, Secretary, although you say that you will adhere to student-centered professional principles, so on and so forth, can you tell us, in your review, in particular, since you say you attach importance to the to consulting professionals and stakeholders, how can you guarantee that the views and data collected in the consultation process will be impartial and unbiased, for the purpose of making decisions so that in the future the liberal arts study subject will develop in a way that ties in with the community needs, and whether the LS subject will remain a core subject. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Member. As a core subject, as I responded just now, I will not go through the points again. I just emphasize that we have a very well-established mechanism together with the Curriculum Development Council and the Hong Kong EAA. We jointly worked on the review involving extensive consultation. We ask schools, teachers, and professional organizations and major stakeholders in the process. That is the start of the NAS medium-term review. You should have confidence in our system. Over the years, international organizations have repeatedly reminded us that one of our cornerstones is that we have been able to continue to improve our system to keep up with the times. And this is not just coming from me, this is coming from the assessments from international organizations. So we should continue to fine-tune and improve the system. My question was very clear, Mr. President. I'm not against the fine-tuning measures or review. Well, Mr. Leung, please refrain from making comments. No, I haven't made my comment. I just want to say, now just repeat your question. I just want to ask him very clearly how he can guarantee that the consultation process in this review could be unbiased and impartial so that the outcome would cater for the community's needs. Secretary, anything to add? I just wish to add that there is a curriculum aim for each subject, and we have a very clear set of procedures involving different bodies and organizations. We also have the participation of major stakeholders. No one can anticipate the outcome, because this will be having a preconceived perception. We should be objective. Mrs. Regina Yip. Mr. President, I want to ask the Secretary this. Now, you talked about all the good points about the liberal studies under the NAS review, and that it can help cultivate independent thinking skills and help students think critically and rationally. Then will you encourage children of civil servants not to study abroad or to go for the IB route? Because I understand that the children of many government officials go for the IB route. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, member, for the question. This is a subjective decision involving a number of factors as to which route the children should go for. I won't say whether we must or must not study liberal studies, but the point is liberal studies is an important part of the new curriculum. As I said just now, we have just rolled out the NAS for a few years, and there is much room to improve, including teachers, training, etc. As I said just now, in terms of the design of the curriculum and other initiatives, we have received much recognition. But the important thing is to continue to fine-tune and improve the system. We, based on the views expressed and the experience, we improve the system. He hasn't answered my question at all. If the liberal studies subject is so good, why don't you issue a circular asking all civil servants to support their children to study liberal studies instead of IB? Mrs. Yip, I don't think this question is directly relevant to the main oral question. I believe that the Secretary considered a lot of advantages in the new senior academic structure, not just liberal studies. Dr. Priscilla Leung, Well, according to the Secretary's reply in the last paragraph, a lot of stakeholders were involved in the consultation process. But parents are missing. Well, in fact, I received 925 complaints from parents. And all these complaints were about liberal studies. And I also received complaints from students. In the Hong Kong EAA's report, this year, it was said that students was mistaken in thinking that compliance with the law means rule of law, and there are lots of complaints because no standard answers could be, or no model answers could be given, and they just require students to have critical thinking. Please ask your question. Many students sitting for exams would like to have some sort of autonomy. That is to address the community's concerns and not to designate liberal studies subject as a core subject, which may affect their chance of getting into universities. It should be set as an elective so that they have an option. I think many parents and examination candidates are now listening, and they will be very disappointed in your answer. Will you make a decision and let them decide whether or not liberal studies should be studied instead of making it a core subject, which may contribute to their scores for university admission? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your question. As one of the subjects, as a core subject, as I said in the main reply, since the education reform in year 2000, liberal studies were rolled out as a result of in-depth discussion and deliberations. Now, we said stakeholders, etc. Well, I didn't put parents here, but parents are important. I met with different parent associations, and we discussed the same issue. We even raised this issue at a forum involving over 1,000 participants, and the parents also expressed their views. We should think of this issue from multiple perspectives. I'm not saying that our education system is perfect. That's why I said just now that we need constant improvement and fine-tuning. Now, the NAS was just rolled out for a few years. And the first batch of university students under the NAS wouldn't come by until 2016. And liberal studies is one of the subjects of which the scores would be counted towards university admission. And this is just one of the subjects. I think we should look at the matter from this perspective. Please understand that this is a new subject. We need more data to be collected. And for the second stage medium-term review, this is the purpose. Sorry, Dr. Leung, I cannot let you pursue the question because we have spent 25 minutes on this question, far more than the time normally allocated to a question.
The third oral question, Honorable Wong Ting-kwong. Thank you, President. It has been reported that international crude oil prices have been falling continuously in recent months, with a cumulative drop by about 20% from the peak this year. But local retail prices of oil products have not been adjusted downwards accordingly, thus giving rise to a situation where the relevant prices are quick to rise and slow to drop. In response, a spokesman of an oil company explained that the local retail prices of oil products were subject to a number of factors, including import prices, duties, operating costs, and so on. In this connection, will the government inform this Council? 1. Whether it has studied if the import prices of oil products have been broadly in line with international crude oil prices in terms of trend movements and adjustment magnitude since July this year. if the study outcome is in the negative of the reasons for that. 2. Whether it has studied if the local retail prices of unleaded petrol and ultra-low sulfur diesel have been broadly in line with the monthly average Singapore free-on-board prices in terms of trend movements and adjustment magnitude since July this year. If the study outcome is in the negative of the reasons for that. And 3, whether it will request oil companies to enhance the transparency in the pricing of oil products, whether it has plans to lower the operating costs of oil companies by such means as reducing fuel duties and land premium for petrol filling stations, so as to reduce the prices of oil products to benefit users or related industries. Secretary for the Environment. President. Parts 1 and 2 of the question is like this. Retail prices of auto fuels in Hong Kong are determined by oil companies having regard to commercial practices and their operating costs. We appreciate the impact of auto fuel prices on the public. We understand your concern and therefore have been monitoring the changes in the local retail prices of auto fuel and comparing them with the trend movements of international oil prices benchmarked against the Singapore free-on-board or FOB prices for unleaded petrol and motor vehicle diesel. We have been in close contact and have urged them that in time of international oil price reduction, they should adjust prices promptly to lessen the burden on the public. Hong Kong has no oil refinery. All local auto fuels are imported refined oil products instead of crude oil. Crude oil and refined oil products such as unleaded petrol and motor vehicle diesel are different products. Therefore, changes in international crude oil prices and changes in price of unleaded petrol and motor vehicle diesel are not necessarily the same. When making reference to international oil price, it is more appropriate to compare against Singapore FOB prices, that is, the means of Platts Singapore or MOPS, and the price of oil products by or imported by oil companies. Our observation shows that the trend movement of Hong Kong oil products import prices and international crude oil prices are generally in line in the long term, although changes in prices are not exactly the same in terms of timing and magnitude. Also, the trend movement of local auto fuels retail prices and those of MOPS are generally in line. However, the magnitude of changes may differ due to the following factors. A. MOPS prices fluctuate daily, but oil companies do not adjust their auto fuel prices daily. B. Local unleaded petrol prices include duty. In addition, when oil companies adjust the prices, apart from the import prices of oil products, they also take into account changes in other operating costs such as land costs, government rent, staff cost, transportation, promotion, operation of oil terminal, etc. And C. Oil companies generally provide various kinds of discounts and promotion to customers and drivers. Therefore, the selling prices of auto fuels are effectively lower than the retail prices. Oil prices have been reduced in response to failing import prices since July 2014. The majority of companies have reduced their retail prices for as many as 10 times, with maximum accumulated reduction of around $1.40 per liter. Oil companies explain that these price adjustments not only reflect the trend movements of Singapore FOB prices for unleaded petrol and motor vehicle diesel, but have also taken into account factors such as operating costs and discounts as mentioned above. Number 3. In a free market economy, similar to prices of other consumer products, the retail prices of auto fuels in Hong Kong are determined by the market. The policy of the government is to make its best effort to ensure a stable fuel supply, maintain market openness, and remove barriers to entry into the market to enhance competition. We also endeavor to improve transparency of auto fuel product prices to facilitate consumers to obtain sufficient information for making choices. On improving transparency, we post onto our website on a weekly basis the movements in local import prices and retail prices of auto fuels in comparison with movements in FOB prices of Singapore unleaded petrol and motor vehicle diesel. We have also commissioned the Consumer Council to post onto its website on a weekly basis the local auto fuels retail price and information on various types of cash and non-cash discounts offered by oil companies, and to launch the auto fuel price calculator to promote price competition among oil companies and to facilitate consumers to make choices among the various discounts and benefits offered by oil companies. As smartphones become popular, we have commissioned the Consumer Council to develop smartphone applications for the auto fuel price calculator to allow consumers through the smartphone to access petrol filling station or PFS information, for example, address, telephone number, auto fuel prices, etc., and track their current location so as to find a route to a particular PFS, and also to calculate auto fuel prices, instant account, special discount of different PFS, create personal account for keeping track of payment records and bonus points, etc. This smartphone application for unleaded petrol was launched in the second half of 2012, while that for diesel is expected to be launched before the end of this year. Regarding the suggestion on reducing fuel duty, I would like to point out that the government currently levies a duty of $6.06 per litre on unleaded petrol, which has not been adjusted since 1998, while that for Euro 5 diesel is zero at the moment. Unleaded petrol is the fuel for private motor vehicles. We have a small place with limited road space, and we also have excellent mass transport networks to meet the public's needs. Fuel duty not only provides revenue to the government, but it also helps to achieve the policy objective to alleviate traffic congestion and air pollution caused by motor vehicles. The government therefore strikes a balance among various factors, such as tax revenue, environmental protection, transportation, and the level of social acceptance when setting the rate of fuel duty. Finally, the Honorable Wong Ting-kwong mentioned the policy on land premium of PFS. Same as other land sales arrangements, the granting of government land for use by PFS is to offer the sites to the highest bidder by public tender according to free market mechanisms. In a free market economy, the government generally does not subsidize the commercial operation of individual trade through waiving or granting concessionary land premium. Thank you. Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. Thank you. I find it a bit strange that it is the Secretary for the Environment who is answering my question instead of the SCED. In the main reply, second paragraph, it is said that our observation, meaning the administration's observation, the trend movements of Hong Kong oil products, import prices, and international crude oil prices are generally in line in the long term. My observation is when oil companies adjust the prices of oil products, very often, I should not say very often, but always, they are quick to raise prices and slow to reduce prices. So my question is, my impression actually is that you have always been passive as an administration. My question is, after the competition ordinance will become effective, will the administration be proactive in investigating into the setting of prices of oil products by oil companies, the competitiveness amongst them, or the competition among them, and also whether they are in line with trend movements? Secretary, President, and Mr. Wong, your question has to do with the competition ordinance and how it relates to the subject under discussion. I'd like to say that the making of the cross-trade competition ordinance is to combat on antitrust or anti-competitive behavior in any trade in order to make sure that there will be continuous competition in the market. But the competition ordinance does not seek to also control the setting of prices in a competitive environment. The first conduct rule in the competition ordinance is that you should not distort or make barriers to the decisions made by international organizations, including having a cartel or price rigging, etc. If the Competition Commission has reason to suspect that there is anti-competitive behavior, they will have the power to investigate into such cases. Thank you, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, President. The Secretary's reply emphasizes that the oil market in Hong Kong is part of the free economy. Now, the most important indicator of a free economy is that the oil companies would seek to make the greatest profit. Now, this is from the Environment Bureau. This is a graph plucked from their website in terms of monitoring oil prices. Between the MOPS price of Singapore and the retail price in Hong Kong, you can see a difference, and that would represent the profit for oil companies and also their fixed costs. I can see that in the past 5 years, there is a very big change. At the beginning, the difference is $3, but now it's $5. In other words, the oil companies' costs have gone up by 60%, including the profit for oil companies. My question is, in the process of monitoring, have you looked at the changes in such figures so as to act as a gatekeeper for the public? Because such data change would mean that if the fixed cost for oil companies has not risen sharply, then it means their profits have risen sharply. So have you studied into the differences in the figures here? Secretary. President, I thank Mr. Wu for his question. We have been monitoring the retail prices of auto fuels and also the trend of MOPS. As Mr. Wu observed, there is a correlative relationship between the two prices, but you can see that there is a difference between the two prices. As I said in my main reply, prices are affected by many factors, including land costs, government rent, staff cost, transportation, promotion, operation of oil terminal, etc. These are local factors affecting price setting. And I also said something in the main reply. Oil companies provide different discounts and promotions to customers and drivers. So if we only look at the published retail prices, that may not represent the exact price paid by consumers. So this is a little complex. But overall speaking, we monitor the situation. We ensure that there is sufficient competition in the market and that there will be transparency in setting prices so there is a choice for consumers. Mr. Wu, my question has not been answered at all. My question was whether he studied into those figures. Is it that it represents the change in operating costs for the oil companies? Because the difference has risen by 60% from $3 to $5. And what is behind the rise of 60%? That has not been answered. Secretary, thank you for that follow-up from Mr. Wu. The administration's main duty is to provide sufficient information to the relevant users and also to promote appropriate market competition. When there is market competition, there may be different local costs of operation, and so the prices have risen. I think that has to be left to the market, but our main responsibility is to create an environment conducive to competition, so the relevant trades in society can have services and the products. No, I asked him whether he has done the study, but he has not answered the question. Secretary, any supplement from you? President, I have no supplement. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you, President. In the reply, para 3, well, actually the second last paragraph, you say the tariff on Euro 5 diesel is 0. From what I understand, the Euro 5 diesel should have 50 ppm as sulfur content, but in Germany, Switzerland, they are already encouraging their citizens to use ULSD with 10 ppm sulfur content only. Of course, we want to use cheap oil products, and also they are environmental friendly in order to take the place of diesel. So, Secretary, do you have any intention to introduce tax concessions so that our consumers can make use of diesel that has a lower sulfur content, for example, only 10 ppm? Secretary. President, Mr. Leung, according to the information I have, our diesel in Hong Kong complies with the Euro 5 standard, and the sulfur content is 0.001, so it is consistent with other places. Apart from zero duty on Euro 5 diesel, I'm asking him whether there will be more tax concessions, for example, tax rebates. Secretary, President, I already said that our tax rate is already 0. Society is concerned whether we can use biofuel, whether it can be used by more people so we can reduce our carbon footprint, and the administration is now already procuring vehicles and vessels which can use biofuel. But I think you're aware that we are trying to tackle waste oil to see how we can better provide the environment. I hope that there will be a basis to discuss this after that exercise is done. Mr. Tam Yu-chung, I'd like to ask the President. Now we have this fuel surcharge when we buy an air ticket, and this is set according to oil prices. The administration has to give the approval before the fuel surcharge can be collected. I'd like to ask the Secretary whether you're aware whether the fuel surcharge has been reduced markedly because of reduction in oil prices recently. Secretary, thank you for that question. My understanding is that this supplementary has nothing to do with the main question, and it is also under the jurisdiction of other policy bureaus. Mr. Tam, I think the question is relevant, but if the Secretary does not have an answer, maybe he can give me a written reply. Secretary, would you refer the question to the relevant policy bureaus? Yes, we'll do that. President. Mr. Ng Lang Sing. Thank you, President. With regard to the second last paragraph, it says that unleaded petrol is the fuel for private motor vehicles, and that this may lead to air pollution. Mr. President, I'm aware that you talked to the press, and you said that under our so-called drum here, that we found that there was some facility underground. And so I'd like to ask about the monitoring on the using of fuel. It is not about money, but safety. Do you think you need to optimize your way of monitoring the operation? Mr. Ng, I think your question has no direct relationship to the main question. Secretary, would you like to attempt an answer? Secretary, I agree with your observation. I believe this supplementary has nothing to do with the main question.
Question 4, the Honorable Michael Tien. President, in 2007, the government implemented the Unsolicited Electronic Messages Ordinance and established do not call registers for the purpose of regulating the sending of commercial electronic messages, including fax messages, emails, short messages, and pre-recorded film messages, but person-to-person telemarketing calls were excluded. Subsequently, to further protect the personal privacy of the public, The Personal Data Privacy Amendment Ordinance 2012, or the Amendment Ordinance, came into full operation in April 2013, stipulating that any data user must, before using personal data in direct marketing or providing personal data to another person for the use in direct marketing, notify the data subjects of his intention of so doing and receive their consent. Yet, the results of a survey conducted by the media have revealed that the problem of members of the public receiving marketing messages is still rather serious in recent years, and the situation has not been improved so far. Hong Kong people received an average of 150 telemarketing calls per person per year, and they also frequently receive marketing messages sent through short messages, pre-recorded phone messages, even mobile messaging applications, which of cause serious nuisance to an impact on their daily life. In this connection, will this government inform this council, 1, whether it has studied and assessed the current situation of telemarketing activities, such as the daily average number of telemarketing calls received by each member of the public and the economic losses suffered by them due to such calls? For instance, I have to pay $28 per call received when I was in Europe. 2. Given that the Office of the Privacy Commissioner on Personal Data had referred a total of 18 complaints relating to the use of personal data in telemarketing activities to the police during the period from the 1st of April last year to early August this year, but among them, there was no case in which the relevant persons were convicted, whether the authorities have conducted regular reviews of the effectiveness of the existing legislation in preventing the use of personal data in telemarketing activities, and 3, given that the authorities have all along refused to introduce legislation to regulate P2P telemarketing calls on the ground, that it will affect the livelihood of 20,000 persons, whether the authorities have any means to enable members of the public to exercise their rights to be free from the nuisance caused by such calls, and if they do, of the details, if not the reasons for that. Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development. President, the Unsolicited Electronic Messages Ordinance, or UEMO, CAT 593, came into full operation in December 2007. It regulates the sending of commercial electronic messages, including pre-recorded phone messages, short messages, fax messages, emails, etc. When sending commercial electronic messages, senders must comply with the rules of sending commercial electronic messages prescribed under the UEMO. In 2008, the Communications Authority, or CA, also established 3 do-not-call registers for fax messages, short messages, and pre-recorded phone messages in accordance with the UEMO. Since the operation of the ordinance in 2007, the number of reports on suspected contravention of the ordinance has drastically decreased from some 8,000 per year to around 2,000 per year in recent years. It is believed that such decrease reflects the effectiveness of the implementation of the ordinance. At present, the ordinance does not cover P2P telemarketing calls, mainly because most business enterprises in Hong Kong are SMEs which rely on electronic communications as a means of marketing. To avoid affecting the development of normal electronic marketing activities, P2P calls were excluded from the regulatory ambit when the government formulated the UEMO. On the other hand, the Personal Data Privacy Amendment Ordinance 2012 introduced multiple amendments to the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance to strengthen the protection of personal data privacy. The amendment ordinance was implemented in 2 stages in 2012 and 2013. 13 new provisions concerning direct marketing, including the provisions which require data user to take specified action before using personal data in direct marketing, and data user must not use personal data in direct marketing without data subject's consent, commenced operation on the 1st of April 2013. My reply to the 3 questions raised by the Honorable Michael Tien is as follows. 1. The government has been monitoring the situation of P2P calls. The overall numbers of inquiries and complaints related to P2P calls received by the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau and the Office of the Communications Authority have decreased in recent years. The overall numbers in 2012, 2013, and 2014 are 2,010, 1,693, and 1,004 respectively, among which inquiries comprise a substantive part. According to the survey conducted in 2008 by a consultant instructed by the government, respondents who took part in the survey indicated they had received on average 3.47 P2P calls in the previous week. On the other hand, the survey conducted by the Office of the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data in March 2014 showed that respondents had received 3.8 P2P calls during the week before they took part in the survey. The government has not studied the economic impact brought about by such calls to the number of public who have received those calls. 2. The amendment ordinance came into full operation in April 2013. It imposes stringent regulation on the use of personal data in direct marketing and deterrent penalties on violations. Use of personal data in direct marketing in contravention of provisions of the amendment ordinance is punishable by a fine up to $500,000 and up to 3 years imprisonment. Where provision of personal data for gains is involved, the offender is liable to a fine up to $1 million and up to 5 years imprisonment. From April 2013 to early August 2014, the PCPD referred to the police 18 complaints concerning use of personal data in P2P direct marketing calls. Among these cases, 15 involved direct marketing calls made after the commencement of provisions on direct marketing in the amendment ordinance. Investigations are still ongoing for 5 of the cases, and of the 2 cases closed, 10 of the 10 cases closed, police investigation revealed no non-compliance with the law in these 2 cases, and the 8 causes were not substantiated for criminal proceedings, mainly because complainants refused to further assist investigation or the direct marketing calls were made outside Hong Kong. With the implementation of the amendment ordinance, the PCPD has successfully raised the community's awareness and understanding of restrictions on the use of personal data in direct marketing through public education as well as promotion and training activities for the trades. The CMAB will continue to keep in view the implementation of the amendment ordinance and latest developments. The issue in relation to P2P cases is complicated, which involves inter alia issues relating to the use of personal data, nuisance, legitimate marketing, and flow of information. We do not object to the suggestion of strengthening the regulation of P2P calls outright, and has maintained an open mind towards the suggestion. However, any tightening of regulation may have an impact on the employment and livelihood of some tens of thousands who are engaged in carrying out the legitimate marketing activities, as well as commercial transactions that are facilitated by the relevant legitimate marketing activities carried out by various enterprises, particular SMEs. Therefore, when exploring the way forward for any tightening of the regulation on P2P calls, careful and thorough consideration of these relevant factors must be taken. Sectors that make most of the P2P calls are the 4 sectors of finance, insurance, telecommunications, call centers. To minimize the nuisance caused by the public to the public by marketing calls, the government has since end 2010 actively encouraged the trade associations of these 4 sectors to drop and reissue their respective codes of practice on P2P calls and to encourage the industries concerned to adopt the best practice recommended in these industry codes. Since June 2011, the 4 trade associations have already joined the self-regulatory regime, and P2P calls made by members of these trade associations are regulated by the industry codes. If members of the public do not want to receive P2P calls from a particular company, they may make an unsubscribe request to the relevant company. The industry code stipulates that telemarketers should honor the request relating to unsubscribing P2P calls made by recipients. The relevant industry codes have been uploaded on the websites of the respective trade associations. We've been maintaining communications and having meetings with the relevant trade associations in order to understand the latest implementation situation of the scheme and industry codes. Recently, the finance sector has improved its industry code, requesting telemarketers to take the initiative in providing the names and official contact numbers of the companies to recipients, as well as stipulating the practices to be adopted if there is a need to obtain more information from the recipients or arrange meetings. These aim at allowing the recipients to verify the identities of telemarketers. Mr. Michael Tien, the administration claimed that it has not studied the economic impact brought about by P2P calls. Let me tell you, when in Europe, on average, I received 3 such calls, $28 per call. That is close to $100 a day. The administration has not addressed my question because we are talking about cold calls. many friends have received on average 4 to 5 cold calls per day. The same company can call you on alternate days, and some may call me James Tan, and some ask whether I want facial services, some ask whether I need a continuous education or application to RCHs. I have a male colleague who received a call, and before he started to speak, he was asked whether he has cervical cancer. A male colleague. Now you are so tolerant. Are you asking the public to be tolerant to such calls? Will the government continue to allow cold calls to create nuisance to the public? Why don't you legislate to regulate cold calls? Now, President, if you're in Europe, you receive a call asking whether you have cervical cancer at a cost of $28. I don't know how you respond. Secretary, your reply has nothing to do with cold calls, which is a major problem, and they have to do with call centers. Secretary, thank you, Mr. Tien, for your question. I'd like to provide some information. The PCPT did a survey in March. 534 people were questioned, and about 91% of them said they had received P2P calls. Over 75% of them said that they could identify a direct use of their personal data, and half of the respondents in their survey, or over half of them, said that the use of personal data was involved in these calls. So many of these calls are related to the use of personal data, and in my main reply, I said that the amendment ordinance gives protection to members of the public when personal data is used for marketing activities. Then the subjects concerned must be obtained first, and if such telemarketing services are provided without the subjects concerned, well, as I said, 4 main sectors are involved, and they have devised their industry codes, and we liaise very closely with these sectors on the implementation of these codes. In general, the number of complaints and inquiries have dropped substantially. The codes would include the appropriate time to make such calls, and how there won't be undue nuisance caused to subjects. So I think the ordinance has been, or the code has been effective in reducing nuisance. Mr. Tan, the Secretary has not answered whether it is going to legislate to regulate cold calls. So is your answer that you won't? You only rely on self-regulation by the sectors. So when a male subject received a call asking whether he has cervical cancer, would you say that self-regulation has been successful? Mr. Tien, I believe the Secretary has answered your question. Can you say specifically, Secretary, whether the administration has any intention to legislate? Secretary, we have no objection to enhanced regulation of P2P marketing calls. We maintain an open mind. We will consider the suggestion very actively. But Mr. Tien talked about promotion of services for the female, for female to male subjects. I believe the business sector is cost conscious. They will not use their resources unnecessarily to data subjects. Mr. Wong Ting-kwong, in 2007, when the UEMO was enacted to regulate cold calls, DAB took an unprecedented move to amend the ordinance. However, the DP led by Mr. Sin Chung-kai opposed the CSAs, so we failed. Our amendment had to do with regulation of P2P marketing calls. Now, Mr. So said that the industries have very strict restrictions on the use of personal data. But let me tell you that they are not too concerned about the use of the receiver's money. For instance, I am the person to receive the call. I have to pay the phone bill. Mr. Tien has to pay $28 per call when he's in Europe. Now, if I am in business, I should not ask you to foot the bill for telemarketing. This is a question of principle. You are imposing such costs on me. So I'd like to ask whether in saying that you are open-minded, does that mean that you will just note our suggestions with no change in position? I've been lobbying for this since 2007. It's been 7 full years. I still have a lot of views about such calls. I share Mr. Michael Tien's sentiment. When I was overseas, I received cold calls even at midnight or in small hours of the day. So, Secretary, please do give serious consideration to our views. Mr. So, thank you, Mr. Wong. I note that you have followed up on this issue for many years, and I agree that we should minimize the nuisance to members of the public of P2P calls. Now, when you're overseas, if you hear a different ringtone, I think we ask the industry to hang up the call if the ringtone is different, so as to reduce nuisance to someone who's overseas. As regards whether we are not going to change our position, the answer is no. Mr. Wong, suggestions has been the momentum for my colleagues to work in this area. So we will consider the nuisance calls to the public, and we will also ensure that the business sector will make good use of the system and improve the situation. We'll discuss with the sectors. Thank you. Mr. Wu Chi-wan. In the Secretary's reply, it is said that in the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance 2012, it is said that personal data cannot be used in direct marketing without the consent of the data subject. However, recently I've received a lot of letters from banks or companies telling us that they have amended their personal data using arrangements. If I do not reply to such letters, my personal data would be used in direct marketing by this company and its group or companies in the same group or subsidiaries. So, Secretary, is this practice in line with the legislative provisions in the amendment ordinance? Will you study whether the approach by these companies have gone beyond the legal limits in the amendment ordinance? Secretary. Yes, I also have some queries about the example you gave me just now. However, the CMAB is the responsible bureau. And I understand that the commissioner will have a meeting with the CA panel to answer this question. I will relay your question to the CMAB for a detailed written reply.
Question number 5, Ms. Elizabeth Quat. Thank you. The Coroner's Report 2013 pointed out that last year, the number of suicides in Hong Kong was 1,040, a rise by more than 20% from the previous year. Among those persons who committed suicide last year, 644 of them were male, outnumbering the 396 women by 60%. And those of middle-aged, aged 30 to 59, men and elderly persons aged 60 or above, that is, accounted for 28% and 36% respectively. Moreover, the suicide rate of teenagers, in other words, persons aged 19 or below, soared by 38% as compared with the figure in 2012. In this connection, will government inform this council A, whether it has studied the reasons why the suicide rates of men and elderly persons were higher than those of other groups and why the suicide rate of teenagers soared last year? If it has, of the details. If not, whether it will conduct relevant studies. B, whether it has analyzed if the phenomena of middle-aged men and elderly persons having higher suicide rates and the suicide rate of teenagers soaring reflect that the government and the community have failed to provide sufficient support for the groups of the respective support services currently provided by the government for these groups, and C, whether the government will make reference to the statistics on suicides and outcome of analysis on the causes of suicides and consider providing more targeted support services for people of different age groups in need. If it will, of the details. If not, the reasons for that. Secretary for Labour and Welfare. My reply to Ms. Quat's question is as follows. A. Suicide is a complicated issue and is caused by multifaceted factors including biological, social and psychological factors that interact with one another. Each case has its uniqueness. All along, the government has been taking a multi-pronged approach in tackling the issue of suicide. Studies indicate that elderly suicide cases are mostly attributable to physical illnesses, and some of the elderly involved, in fact, suffered from depression. Moreover, according to the WHO, the differences in the suicide death cases among men and women may be caused by potential factors including the different methods of men and women in dealing with stress and conflicts, tendency for adopting and availability of different means of suicide, and difference in the rates in seeking assistance for mental disorders. According to the coroner's report of the past 5 years, the number of suicidal deaths involving persons aged 19 or below, as determined by the coroners, remained at about 20-odd cases per year. B. For mainstream services, 65 integrated family services centers, 22 family life education units, and 2 integrated services centers in the territory provide preventive, supportive, and remedial services for people in need. Elderly persons, young persons, or men can, according to their needs, receive family life education and counseling, as well as participate in group activities with a view to tackling their life challenges with a positive attitude. In addition, social workers in the 55 medical social services units and hospitals and clinics throughout Hong Kong assess the suicidal risk of their clients during case assessment. Meanwhile, the SWD has been implementing the One School Social Worker for each secondary school scheme in the territory and subvents integrated children and youth services centers and outreaching social work teams to provide students and young persons with support services. Besides, 160 elderly centers in the territory provide a range of services for elderly persons, including visits, emotional support, counseling, and referrals. On specialized services, the SWD subvents the Suicide Crisis Intervention Center of the Samaritan Befrienders Hong Kong to provide outreaching, crisis intervention, intensive counseling services, etc. to persons beset with suicidal problems. In respect of hotline services, a total of 6 dedicated hotline services are run by the SWD and NGOs to help persons with suicidal tendency or in emotional distress. The hotline services encourage and refer the clients to receive in-depth counseling services corresponding to their needs. As regards health services, the psychiatric department of the Hospital Authority has been providing comprehensive assessment, treatment, and follow-up support services for patients with suicidal risk. These services are applicable to middle-aged men, elderly, and young persons. Besides, the Elderly Suicide Prevention Program of the HA provides prompt psychiatric treatment for elderly persons who are suspected to have depression or suicidal tendency. SWD welfare organizations or doctors can refer such elderly persons to the program for follow-up. The Elderly Health Centers of the Department of Health adopts a multidisciplinary team approach in providing health assessment and treatment services for elderly persons and arranges clinical psychologists to provide psychological assessment and counseling for elderly persons suffering from depression. Established under the department's Elderly Health Service, the visiting health teams in all 18 districts of Hong Kong provide mental health promotion programs for elderly persons in collaboration with other elderly service providers in the district. Separately, the Student Health Service Centers of the DH provide health assessment for secondary and primary students questions, including psychosocial health and behavioral questionnaire assessment. Students with emotional or behavioral problems or even suicidal tendency will be referred to the HASWD or welfare organizations for follow-up. C. The government has all along been concerned about the issue of suicide and encouraged tertiary institutions and NGOs to conduct studies as well as strengthen the collection and analysis of suicide data so as to facilitate the formulation of measures by the concerned authorities. In recent years, the government has subsidized the Hong Kong Jockey Club Center for Suicide Research and Prevention of the University of Hong Kong to conduct research on suicide-related issues. The scope of the center's research covers people of different age groups and gender. To further cater for the needs of young persons, SWD has commissioned 3 NGOs to launch their respective 3-year pilot cyber youth outreaching projects since 2011. Young persons who are assessed to have suicidal tendency will be referred to receive follow-up or crisis intervention services. Approval has been given for the projects to be extended till July 2015. Moreover, SWD in 2011 commissioned the center to implement a pilot project on community-based prevention of youth suicide in the North District. The project is expected to be completed in March 2015. To sum up, the government has been allocating resources continuously to suicide prevention, including improving existing services and developing professional counseling services. Thank you. Ms. Elizabeth Quat. President, I think one suicide case is too many, and every year there are over 1,000 people who seek their own lives. And of course, some services are provided by the government, but I think there is still room for improvement. According to a research center concerning the problem of elderly suicide, those who are physically weak and a lack of support have a higher tendency towards suicide. So I think those who are not living with their children are most vulnerable. In fact, the Housing Department has implemented some programs to encourage young people to live with their parents. So I want to know whether the concept of integration of the 2 generations can be further promoted in HS projects, and will the Housing Department also take more proactive steps to encourage public housing tenants to live with their parents? Yes, thank you, President. In fact, as I've said, suicide is caused by multifaceted factors. My understanding is that both the HS and the HA have similar arrangements to encourage children to live with their elderly parents. Now, for example, people can be given priority on the waiting list and in the allocation of public housing flats. I will bring your suggestion to the Transport and Housing Bureau. I do agree that more needs to be done, and of course there's always room for improvement. Thank you. I want to know, President, whether the private sector will also be encouraged to provide housing for the 2 generations. Now, I'm sure the Family Council will also agree with you. We have in Hong Kong 119,000 elderly people who are living alone, not with their families and their children. But of course, not of them have suicidal tendency. But still, we will follow up on your proposal. Mr. Lee. Yes, President. I think society's consensus is that 1 suicide case is too many. Now, in fact, among all the age groups, the suicide problem among the elderly is most worrying. The suicide rate among elderly is at least double the rates of suicide of other age groups, and those elderly persons who are ill are most vulnerable. Now, the Secretary has said that he will reflect the member's suggestion to the Housing Bureau. I have talked to some pet organizations, and they've said that in overseas countries there is evidence that elderly persons accompanied by pets are less depressed. But then in Hong Kong, our public housing estates do not allow the keeping of pets. And so I would like to ask the Secretary whether Hong Kong will learn from overseas experience so that elderly depression on the part of elderly persons can be alleviated with the company of pets. I think this is a very good suggestion, President. In fact, we are trying to think of effective ways to reduce the suicide rate among the elderly, and we also have neighborhood support schemes. For example, in the districts we are identifying volunteers to help these elderly persons, and some of them are in fact also elderly persons. At the moment there are 7,000 so-called hidden elderly in society, and we need to do more to help them. Mr. Paul Tse, now in fact a recent case in the US has stirred up widespread concern. That person was not very old, but then he had chronic illnesses. In Hong Kong, Secretary, have we received any request from elderly concerning euthanasia? We haven't really studied this matter in depth, but to answer your question, our welfare organizations and their frontline staff do identify depressed elderly persons with suicidal tendency, and the HA will arrange for them to join the fast track queue to see psychiatrists. And in fact, since last year, we've covered about 7,000 elderly persons, but out of 7,000, about 48 in fact committed suicide. But you can see that the program success rate is 99.3%. So I think early intervention and treatment is very important. We should try to instill into these elderly persons positive life values. But anyway, I will also bring your point back to our doctors for their consideration. Mr. Ng Sing, may I refer to part 2 of the reply, President? It is said that the Student Health Service Centers of the Department of Health provide health assessment for secondary and primary students, including psychosocial health and behavioral questionnaire assessment. I want to know whether the government has compared Hong Kong with the international situation. Now, in fact, many secondary school students in Hong Kong have been involved in political activities and campaigns. And will such involvement cause some psychosocial health problems? And will such involvement means that the Hong Kong situation may not be the same as the international situation and trends? Yes, Chairman. Thank you. We have questionnaires. We also have school social workers to help the students. In fact, concerning the suicide rate for teenagers, we are not a high-risk place worldwide, but of course we are not complacent. In 2012, we're talking about 12.7 for 100,000 people. That's the general situation. And in Japan, it's 23.1, and then in South Korea, 36.6. So we're not a particularly high-risk place, but of course we're not being complacent. Ms. Anne Chang, President, I'm more concerned about suicide among young people. Last year, the suicide rate among them rose by 38%. I understand that there have been a lot of negative sentiments in society in recent years, and I think we should look at whether this is one of the reasons for the rise in the suicide rate among young people. The CE in his policy address this year said in para 101 to 106 that work would be done by the government to strengthen vocational training and lifetime planning for young people so as to enhance their prospects. But then these two initiatives are taken care of by two different departments. So will a joint working group be set up by these two departments to work out targeted measures to map out a better future for young people so that the tendency for young people to commit suicide can be reduced? Secretary. Yes, thank you, President. I want to explain a bit the figures to members. Now concerning the coroner's report 2013, the suicide rate of teenagers rose by 38%. But then if you look at the CNS department's figures, you can see that in fact the situation this year improved when compared with the previous year. Now this is because the dates in the coroner's report represent dates of the conclusion of the cases, because a case might occur 2 years ago. But then it took time for police investigation and court hearings. In 2012, there were 20 cases. In 2013, there were 18. So there was some improvement. And then life planning in school among students. We are, of course, very concerned, but of course, the Education Bureau is the bureau responsible for life planning. But then we, in our bureau, are concerned about the career prospects of young people. So the two bureaus will definitely step up cooperation. Thank you. Mr. Lee. President, I'm concerned about suicide among the elderly. I'm also concerned about the rising suicide rate among young people and teenagers. As I've said just now, one case is too many. And we can see that, in fact, some teenagers at the age of 11 or 12 committed suicide. And according to newspaper reports, they didn't look unhappy or depressed before they committed suicide. But most people speculate that their suicide has to do with academic studies and family problems. So I want to know what more preventive actions can be taken to try to tackle the problem. Secretary. President, thank you. I think for teenagers committing suicide, of course, each case is unique. There may be multifaceted problems, family problems, academic studies, peer pressure, or so on and so forth. So we have one social worker in each secondary school. We have surveys and questionnaire surveys, and we also have IFSCs. But I want to point out that young people, of course, do come across a lot of information on the internet. And so about 3 years ago, the SWD asked NGOs to start browsing the internet, and then at risk young people who showed some tendency towards suicide were identified, and in fact 8,000 such young people have been identified so far. And then the Suicide Crisis Intervention Center of the Samaritan Befrienders has launched a tracking program to try to trace or track young people who are depressed and who may have suicidal tendencies. Is it your question has not been answered? Chairman, I understand that a number of programs and initiatives have been launched, but my question is that there should be scientific tracking surveys to probe into the causes of suicide. Secretary, President, in fact, we've commissioned a Hong Kong Jockey Club Center for Suicide Research and Prevention to carry out such studies. In fact, they have started a study in Choi Yun estate of Shengshui. In fact, a few cases occurred in that estate, and so the center carried out a tracking survey and probe into the reasons, and a report should be available next year. Ms. Elizabeth Quat. President, last year, 699 males committed suicide, and the percentage of suicide was 60%, more than the suicide rate for women. Traditional Chinese culture and thinking dictate that males must not shed tears or seek help even when they encounter problems. They have to remain strong at all times. So will the administration step up publicity and public education to encourage men to seek help when they need to? President, in fact, as I've suggested in my reply, males do adopt different strategies when they encounter problems and when they decide whether to seek help or not. So you can see that for the suicide rates of males and females, the ratio is 6-4. So we need to try to reach out to the males. We will have to try to find effective ways to reach out to them. But I think it's important that when people encounter problems, they have to think positively. In fact, as we've said in an API, there are bound to be more solutions than problems. And we've said we've also got hotlines. They are manned around the clock, but then males are usually reluctant to seek assistance. And you know that for unemployed females, they can get jobs more easily than males who are unemployed. Males have other burdens, for example, their pride, and so on and so forth. Ms. Quat, you said that the ratio was 6-4, but then in 2013, 644 males committed suicide, 396 females, and so the rate of males was 60% higher than that of females. Last question.
Mr. Paul Tse. Thank you, Mr. President. This year's Wine and Dine Festival was recited to the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal as a result of the Occupy Central movement. There are comments that while the event attracted in 4 days a total of 180,000 visitors, it caused the roads in the vicinity overloaded, and some participants complained that it had taken them more than an hour both in waiting for the free shuttle buses and traveling to the venue by bus. The fact that the festival was successfully held at the terminal demonstrates the potential of the terminal for holding mega events, but it also highlights the inadequacy of the ancillary transport facilities for the terminal, which are unable to divert visitor flows. In this connection, will the government inform this council, 1, whether it has conducted a review on the issues relating to the ancillary transport facilities for the terminal as reflected by the festival, including the bottleneck problem arising from having only one single link road to Kowloon Bay, and formulated corresponding measures, if it has, of the review outcome, if not, whether it will conduct such a review immediately. 2, given the fact that the environmentally friendly linkage system for East Kowloon, or EFLS, is anticipated to be commissioned in 2023, the earliest, whether the government will reassess the feasibility of the following proposals, i.e., advancing the completion of the construction of a transportation link between Kun Tao and the terminal, which is included in EFLS, or first, building a simpler temporary floating bridge for pedestrians so as to divert visitor flows to and from the terminal when a mega event is held there. And 3, given various infrastructure projects such as railway projects, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge and the Liantang-Hongyun Wide Boundary Control Point have experienced one after another significant cost overruns of the latest cost estimates for EFLS mentioned in 2, as the feasibility study for EFLS is expected to commence in 2015, and it is yet to find out if EFLS can be implemented. Whether the authorities will consider conducting a feasibility study on constructing the transportation link between Kwun Tong and the terminal as an independent project so as to advance the construction of the transportation link. Thank you. Secretary for Development. Good morning, President. Kai Tak Cruise Terminal is one of the major projects of the Kai Tak development, covering an area of over 330 hectares. KTD is the largest as well as the complex development project in the urban area. It will transform the ex-airport site for the future development of Hong Kong and provide an impetus for the renewal of the adjoining old districts. Indeed, KTD also forms part of the Energizing Kowloon East initiative and will transform the industrial areas at Kowloon Bay and Kwun Tong together with KTD into another core business district or CBD of Hong Kong. The KTD project is being implemented under 3 stages. Under the completed stage 1 works, the terminal and its first berth commenced operation in June 2013. The terminal park was also open to the public in October 2013. The smooth playing out of the Wine and Dine Festival at the KTD in early November 2014 highlights the potential of KTD as the venue for hosting mega events. We have completed the detailed planning of the transport infrastructure for the KTD area. The road projects and associated infrastructure will be implemented to cope with the demand and will dovetail with the completion of the development projects within the area. For instance, we plan to commence construction of a dual 2-lane carriageway next year for replacing the existing single 2-lane carriageway linking Cheung Yip Street in Kowloon Bay with the terminal to serve the development projects at the southern part of the former runway. In the long run, as commercial buildings, various facilities and attractions in KTD and the business areas of Kwun Tong and Kowloon Bay come online, there will be a gradual increase in the traffic demand of Kowloon East. However, the existing road space in the area is limited and cannot cope with such substantial growth in traffic demand or provide the required level of service for a CBD. Also, Kwun Tong area is crowded with buildings which impose significant constraints on widening the existing roads. Therefore, we need to introduce an environmentally friendly linkage systems or the EFLS together with improved pedestrian facilities and at grade green transport modes in order to provide a convenient, safe and reliable linkage system for the CBD of Kowloon East. The Civil Engineering and Development Department, or CEDD, is planning a detailed feasibility study on the proposed EFLS for Kowloon East, subject to funding approval from the Finance Committee of this Council. The DFS will commence in early 2015. Its scope will cover the formulation of an integrated multimodal linkage system and identification of the most suitable and cost-effective integrated transport system for Kowloon East. My reply to the question of Mr. Paul Tse is as follows. 1. According to the Transport Department, at present, the public can travel to the terminal by means of green minibuses and taxis, as well as special KMB bus routes on weekends and public holidays. The terminal also provides free charging parking spaces for private cars. The Transport Department will coordinate with the transport operators, such as during special events, to increase the service frequencies and extend the service hours as and when necessary. The Wine and Dine Festival, organized by the Hong Kong Tourism Board, or HKTB, was held at the open space outside the terminal, where various public functions have been held by different organizations previously. The festival attracted about 180,000 visitors in total. To cope with the high patronage, the HKTB put in place a number of special traffic arrangements, including providing free shuttle bus service for taking the public to and from the venue. The HKTB also closely liaise with the police and the transport department to divert the traffic around the terminal during the festival. In future, relevant departments will draw on past experience in enhancing the traffic arrangements for mega events. As noted in the written reply of the Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development to the Legislative Council on the 12th of November 2014, the operator of the terminal is planning to deploy a pontoon connecting with the apron of the terminal for providing special ferry service on days of ship calls or events, offering marine transport for cruise passengers and event participants. Relevant departments have conducted site inspections and observed trial mooring with the terminal operator and the ferry company with a view to launching a trial ferry service for events at the terminal shortly. Moreover, the capacity of the road network serving the terminal will be substantially increased when a dual two-lane carriageway linking Kowloon Bay and the terminal and other roads within the area are completed. Part 2 of the question, the CEDD is preparing to commence a detailed feasibility study on the proposed EFLS for Kowloon East, in which the transport mode to be adopted for the transport link between Kwun Tong and the ex-runway tip will need to be further studied. Moreover, being part of the long-term transport infrastructure for Kowloon East, the transport link will take time to plan and construct and will not help resolve the current pedestrian flow problem generated by mega events held at the terminal or its nearby areas. For the floating pedestrian bridge proposed by Mr. Chair, despite its temporary nature, its construction is still subject to the provisions of the Protection of the Harbour Ordinance, as the Kwun Tong Typhoon Shelter, or the KTTS, lies within the Victoria Harbour. Moreover, a number of other factors, including the floating pedestrian bridge's safety, its impact on the operation of the KTTS, its operation under adverse weather conditions, and environmental impact assessment will require careful consideration. The construction of the temporary floating pedestrian bridge is therefore by no means a simple works project. 3. Apart from studying and comparing the various options of green transport modes with a view to identifying the most suitable EFLS for Kowloon East, we will also undertake a detailed assessment on the capital cost, financial performance, and economic benefits of the EFLS under the proposed DFS. Detailed project cost estimate for the EFLS can only be assessed as and when the transport mode of the EFLS is determined. The proposed transport link is not only a long-term arrangement for linking Kwun Tong with the ex-runway tube, but also a core part of the EFLS. Its functions and feasibility need to be studied in detail and considered together with the EFLS as a whole. Therefore, we do not consider it appropriate to conduct a separate study for the transport link. Given that the transport link is a long-term arrangement, we will explore ways for enhancing the connectivity between Kwun Tong and the KTD in the short and medium terms for coping with the development needs within the area. Thank you. Mr. Paul Tse, President, precisely because Kai Tak has been left idle for more than 10 years, and now we have these minor movements and changes. Yes, the cruise terminal is completed, and we can see that improvements are being made, including the so-called Fantasies Kai Tak competition has also seen results. But then people are being impatient because you can only, according to the current track, and also whether or not there might be further non-cooperation or filibustering, we don't know. So under the circumstances, the Bureau Director said that it's not a simple works project, but then can there be simple facilities other than the cruise terminal? Can there be other facilities that can be put into use for the time being? Bureau Director, with regard to the cruise terminal and also the connection or connectivity with Kowloon East, indeed we have a short, medium to long-term options. And as Mr. Chair talked about the EFLS, as mentioned in the reply, that's for the long term. With regard to the short term, or to tie in with the Energizing Kowloon East office, concerning the pedestrian connection, we have already put in place some improvement measures. For example, for the 5 connection points or connecting points, we have done some or made some improvements in order to improve the traffic lighting and also the roads that can be widened to facilitate the movement of the pedestrians. With regard, as for the medium term, we have to improve the surrounding transport network, and we are also considering and looking into the possibility of adjusting the routing of the vehicles within the area. We will also be enhancing the management of roadside loading and unloading activities. We will also be reviewing the bus routes, and also before the completion of the EFLS, we are now considering whether or not we can introduce new bus in the KTD in order to tie in with the smart traffic management scheme, so that more traffic information can be disseminated online for the public to know, so that before people go there in choosing the routing, they will have more information. With regard to the KTD, just now we talked about an area of 320 hectares. In fact, there are many projects and they will be completed in phases, and naturally the road system will also be completed in phases. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, Mr. President. Recently, I also took part in the Wine and Dine Festival, and Mr. President, you were also with me when we took part in the event. It's very scenic, and the surrounding environment was also very nice. So even if you are not participating in any activities, if you can just be there to appreciate the scenery of Victoria Harbour, looking at the vessels coming in and out of the harbour, is already very nice. Still, traffic is a problem. Well, for mega events, of course, we need to have large areas to hold in, and it has to be well connected so that it's accessible. For the Wine and Dine Festival, indeed, they have done a more remarkable job when compared to previous years. But then, after all, we still have some problems, as Mr. Paul Tse has said it. All right, please ask your question. Well, the problem is with the traffic and transport. And as Mr. Chair said, for example, for the floating bridge and so on, apparently they are not feasible. But then can you consider doing this? Well, can we consider introducing some sea connection, for example, from Ren Chai or Chim Sha Chai? Can we have a ferry service connecting with the KTD? And that would not pose a safety problem, because if you do not improve the transport or traffic, then how can you attract people to hold mega events there? All right, there are a couple of or a handful of restaurants there, but then what is going to happen? Please allow the Secretary to answer the question. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Lam, for your question. And as I said in the main reply, with regard to the terminal operator, he is now looking into the feasibility of doing this at the tip of the apron by deploying a pontoon connecting the apron of the terminal with the other cruises. Well, they have done trial runs already, and then where there are ship calls or mega events, they will consider doing this. But then as a permanent facility, well, they will have to think a bit further, because it's not just about North Point or Wen Chai Pier, and also the tip of the apron or the apron of the terminal. Well, doing this on a permanent basis might not be viable for the individual operator. But then if we have already got ferry services plying between Kwun Tong and Hong Kong anyway, so in the middle of it, can we ask them to make a stop there? Well, that can be considered. We can also approach the operator to see if that's feasible. Thank you. Mr. Tommy Cheung. Mr. President, Kai-Tek and the related development has been discussed for more than 10 years, and at the time, the incumbent bureau director has not taken his office. So please do not take it upon yourself and think that when I criticize the project, I'm criticizing you. No, that's not true. Well, I'm of course working very closely with the tourism sector. In particular, in the catering sector, we have an eatery or eating establishment with an area of hundreds of thousands of square meter or feet. All right, apparently you talk about the short, medium to long-term arrangement, but then what is meant by short-term and what is meant by medium-term and what is meant by long-term? So are you telling us that even for the short-term, it takes you 20 years to complete it? And then if that is the case, then what happens to the long-term? That would be quite a problem if it takes that long for you to complete anything. And what's most urgent is that in the next 1 or 2 years, you will have to deal with the traffic problem. So can you tell us exactly what you mean by the short, medium to long term? And what's the timetable? Mr. President, I agree that at the terminal, traffic is not desirable. I've been there myself, and therefore it leaves something to be desired. For the short term, yes, something is being done and some is underway already. For example, for the dual two-way or dual two-lane carriageway, we are consulting the district council and will be seeking funding from this council shortly. So that's something that is to happen within the next few years. And then for the longer term, the EFLS, that will also happen in the next 10 years. But then the difficulty is that when we seek funding from this council, we also hope that lawmakers will support us so that we can have a way out. Because if we seek funding for conducting researches, if we are not able to do that, then the entire project will be delayed. Yes, Mr. Chiang, has your question been answered? Well, I was asking about the timeline, and then he said that for the longer term, it would be some 10 years. So can we expect that, well, the short term means that the next couple of years, and then for the medium term is about the next 5 years, and he asked members to give him a way out. I would also hope that for the hirees of the Kai-Tech site, we can also be given a way out. So, Secretary, can you be more specific as to the time frame that you're referring to? Yes, President, just now, we said that in the medium term, we're going to have the dual two-lane carriageway. In fact, we'll be coming to this council early next year for funding, and we hope that we can start works shortly afterwards, and then we can complete that in 2019. And then for the medium term, that's the time frame that I'm talking about. And then whatever goes beyond that, that would be regarded as the long-term development. And I also have this plan. I can also supply it to members after the meeting. That's for your reference. There are different road networks under our plan, and if you look at the different projects, you will see that the projects will be completing in phases, and our plans would also tie in with them. So that's the overall situation. With regard to the hotel, as you know, well, right next to the terminal, there will be some hotels, and there would also be some residential developments. As far as the Bureau is concerned, we would also like to press ahead with these projects as soon as possible, because whether or not it's office accommodation, residential units, or hotels, they are much needed facilities these days. Yes, Mr. Yu Si-wing. Thank you, Chairman, President. Well, the cruise terminal was completed last year. Indeed, many people, including the residents, they would very much like to the terminal to enjoy the facility. But then you can see that traffic is really a big problem. And we know that there is only one GMB route which runs on weekdays, and then on weekends there would be bus service. So that would also limit the extent that visitors can go there. I think this is a vicious circle. As Mr. Tommy Cheung just said, we hope that in the short term something can be done to help the terminal as well as the residents and visitors so that they can go there. So I think what's needed is the administration has to conduct a survey. All right, going to the terminal, or just doing that in Kwun Tong or North Point, you can just ask the residents what would they need what would they need in terms of traffic arrangement before they can go to the terminal. You can also talk to the GMB stakeholders to see if they can introduce some new routes so that people will find it easier or more convenient to go there. If we just wait, we don't know what is going to happen in 2 or 3 years' time. So apparently, nothing can be done about it. So can you just conduct a short-term survey so that you can come up with a report as soon as possible? All right, let's ask the Secretary to reply. Yes, thank you, Mr. Yu, for your question. With regard to the proposed survey, I'll bring it back to the relevant departments and bureaus to consider. With regard to the cruise terminal's current traffic situation after 1 year into its operation, I think some improvements have been made already. For example, for the GMB 86, originally the service frequency is quite short, and now they have extended it. So starting from 6:40 in the morning all the way to 11 p.m., they would run the service. Initially, it's only 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and then during busy hours, they would also increase the frequency to about one service per 8 to 10 minutes. And then for the bus service, yes, as said, it's just a weekend service, and now we will be introducing that on Saturdays. So other than Sundays and public holidays, we also have a Saturday service, and that's from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And the service frequency has also been increased. Instead of 1 hour, one bus per hour, now they're doing that on a 30-minute basis. And as I said, they would also be considering the pontoon service, or the pontoon connecting the apron. So we will consider further measures to improve the traffic there. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, I think there are two problems in relation to the terminal. There is this passenger demand, and second, there would also be a sudden surge in visitor, including when we have ship calls or mega events. So would you be asking the terminal company or mega event organizers so that when there is a sudden surge of people flow to the terminal or area, can they provide a chartered ferry service so that instead of relying on land transport, they can also make use of different transport mode to and from the venue? Bureau Director, thank you, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, for your suggestion. With regard to the charter launch service, I can convey that to the relevant department for consideration. With regard to the terminal service, as Mr. Wu said, we're talking about a regular service. We have the GMB and the bus services, and when there are ship calls or major events, then we will have to facilitate or step up the measures. According to our experience, whenever there are ship calls, basically, the problem is not serious. Because after 1 year into its operation, whenever there are ship calls, the operator knows that there needs to be special transport services, for example, shuttle bus, and also taking the passengers to the hotels, and there would also be some special visit facilities, and special coach buses would also be arranged for those purposes. So as far as the Policy Bureau is concerned, and also the HKTC, well, after a year into the operation, we are now more familiar with that. I'd just like to remind the Bureau Director, he said that he would go back to consider it. Well, according to the Tourism Board, they said that they do not agree with the idea of arranging for charter launch service. So we have spent more than 20 minutes on this, and we'll have to wrap up here.
Bill, we now resume the second reading debate on the child abduction legislation. Ms.